Hi everyone! Today's video we are going to be talking about some vocabulary words that have to do with genetics that you guys will have to know kind of going into this unit. Okay, without knowing these words, it's going to be really difficult for you to actually answer any genetics questions because in the questions they might be specifically asking for you to solve for certain words that I'm going to be explaining in this video. If you don't know what the words mean, it's going to be really difficult for you to actually solve for them. So we're going to be starting by talking about what actual genetics is now that we're moving into the genetics section of the course. So what the heck is genetics? Okay, it's the study of heredity and the variation of inherited traits. We're going to be talking about a whole bunch of different traits, and some of them are inherited in different ways, which we're going to be talking about as well. And we're going to be learning kind of the probability of if I have this parent, and this trait is inherited in this way, okay, what's the probability of my offspring looking like this? That's basically what genetics is, looking at what my offspring is going to look like depending on my parents. So some of the traits that we could look at that you guys have or maybe don't have, we've talked about a couple of these, so being a tongue roller versus a non-roller. Your widow's peak, so that means it's like kind of a little triangle part of the front of your hair versus a straight hairline. You can have attached earlobes or not attached earlobes, hitchhiker thumb, okay, mid-digit hair. You can have cleft chin or freckles, or you can have something called Morton's toe. So these are all genetically inherited traits that you can get from your parents or not from your parents, depending on what they carry. So before I actually go into the vocabulary table that we're going to be filling in, just want to mention a few words that I've mentioned in the past in the last unit. So remember we talked about a sperm and an egg coming together. We know that sperm and egg only carries one copy of each gene. And when they come together, you're going to inherit two copies of that gene because one is coming from your mom and one is coming from your dad. So whatever gene we're looking at, you're always going to have two copies of each one. And those different alternate forms of the gene, so depending on what your parents carry, you might inherit a different form from each of your parents. So for eye color, for example, if your mom has blue eyes and your dad has brown eyes, those are alternate forms of the eye color gene. So they're still carrying the gene for eye color, it just looks slightly different. And those two combined together is going to show kind of what the child looks like. So the combination of your parents' genes kind of put together, the alleles that you inherit from your parents is going to show you kind of what you look like. So when we actually go through and look at these alleles and genes, okay, let's write the actual definitions of them down within the table. So a gene is just a specific unit of our DNA that codes for one trait. Our DNA as humans have been mapped out, and scientists actually know where each trait is found in our DNA, which is kind of interesting. In this video, I want to be talking about one specific example that's kind of tied to each word. So I want to look at the gene that controls what hand you write with. I am personally right-handed, but I know my dad is left-handed. So for this example, for allele, it's just an alternate form of the gene. All traits are controlled by two alleles. So in this example, we would be talking about either you have the right-handed allele or the left-handed allele. Okay, there's always a dominant allele or a recessive allele in most examples. So the dominant allele is the one that kind of overpowers the recessive. Okay, if it is present in the person's DNA, it is going to show up in the way that they look. We always use letters to represent alleles. So if it's a dominant allele, we're going to use a capital letter in order to represent that because it's overpowering the lowercase. Okay, the capital kind of represents that it's more powerful. I picked the letter R because we're going to be talking about right-handed versus left-handed. And in this example, right-handed is dominant. So I picked the R just to tie in with right. But you can pick any letter. They're arbitrary, they're placeholders, so it doesn't actually matter what letter you pick. I usually pick letters that look different when they are lowercase versus uppercase because it's easier to do genetics questions. But if you want to pick a letter that is the same because it kind of ties in with the example, just make sure that if you're looking at the lowercase letter, put a little line over top of it so you can differentiate between the capital and the lowercase easier. So recessive is going to be the exact opposite. It's going to be the one that gets overpowered. So in this example, it's going to be left-handed gets overpowered by right-handed. If a person is carrying both alleles, they are going to present themselves as being right-handed because right-handed overpowers left-handed. So even though we have a combination of both, it's like left-handed isn't even there because it gets covered up by the right-handed. So when I look at someone's genotype, genotype is describing their genes or their letters that they have. So the combination of their two alleles is going to be represented by their letters. So a person can be big R, little r, or little r, little r. If a person is big R, or big R, little r, they would be right-handed because you only need one copy of that right-handed allele in order to be right-handed, because remember it overpowers the left-handed. To be left-handed, you would be little r, little r. Now, my dad is left-handed, so he's little r, little r. My mom is right-handed, and all of me and my siblings are right-handed. So we would either be big R, or big R, little r. But because my dad is left-handed, he would only be able to give off little r's. So I know that my genotype is big R, little r. It wouldn't be big R because I would have to get a big R from my dad, and he has no big R's to give off. So these are some things that we're going to be talking about in this unit. Kind of figuring out your genotypes based on what your parents are and what your siblings are. Sometimes you might have to kind of fill in the blanks. So I'm right-handed and my genotype is big R, little r because I know what my parents are. When I look at phenotype, this is describing the physical appearance of the trait. So what does a person actually look like? For this example, it's are they right-handed or are they left-handed? Okay, but any other trait I could look at, example, eye color, the person either has blue eyes or brown eyes. Okay, what color are their actual eyes for phenotype? But for genotype, it would be what letters do they have that create those eye colors. My phenotype is I'm right-handed. My dad's phenotype is he's left-handed. Okay, and then going back to genotypes, we have actually 3 different options that we talked about. So we have 2 big letters, okay, a combination of the big letter and the little letter, or 2 little letters. So we're going to actually have names for those. Okay, the first one is homozygous dominant. Homozygous is describing that the letters are going to be the same. Homo means same. So if they have the same letters and they're dominant, that means they're going to have 2 capital letters. They carry 2 dominant traits. So for this example, a person who has big R would be right-handed. They have 2 copies of the right-handed gene. We also have homozygous recessive, which again, they're carrying the same letters, as in they're both lowercase. So they have 2 copies of the recessive trait, and they would have to be left-handed. This is my dad's genotype. Okay, little r, little r. And then the last one is a combination of one recessive and one dominant, but they would be showing the dominant trait in their phenotype, and they would be carrying the recessive trait. Okay, I am this genotype for what hand I use to write with. So I am actually a carrier of the left-handed. So if I have a baby with someone who's also a carrier, I could potentially have a baby that's left-handed. Okay, so those are all of the words that you guys have to know for this chapter. Okay, moving into the actual questions. Please practice them. Okay, kind of familiarize yourself with these words. And we are going to be writing a very small quiz tomorrow at the start of class. It's going to be 5 questions just to make sure that you kind of understand the differences between these words. Okay, have a wonderful evening. I will see you all tomorrow. Good luck studying a little bit tonight.